Hey Beans, this is a video for you. I've thought about doing this for a while, but I haven't actually had the time to make it happen. But I decided to do a video to show you how to cook my Bolognese sauce, just in case you need that while we're away. So I might need your help in joining these videos. It's been a little bit of playing around to figure out what's possible with the iPhone and the video capabilities and being able to pause and everything else, because I didn't want a 60-minute video for the entire time of cooking. So I can pause, but I cannot switch between forward and back cameras. So this is going to be the intro that serves for the video recipe of my Bolognese sauce, which I'm not even sure whether it's adapted from. It might be a Bon Appetit article, it might be conglomeration of a few different sources. So I will switch to the other camera and stop this and go through mise en place and some other stuff. Okay, let's go over some mise en place here. So ingredients I've got some diced onions. That's just one large onion chopped up. I've got some carrot. Now I used a shredder for that, but you can use a cheese grater. You can use you can dice it up small. Just the carrot shouldn't be too large. I got some diced garlic, and then I've got spices here that I'll go through when I add them. We got a mixture of ground pork and ground beef, which you can get here in Austria, but you cannot get that in the US and Canada, so I use both pork and beef when I make it in North America. Some tomato puree, some heavy cream, wine, chicken stock, and I think that is about it. So what we're gonna do is we've got my pan heating up, and the process here is we're gonna sear off the meat and then take it out and season it with salt, and that gets a nice kind of like the brown, the Maillard reaction to give it more flavor. Then add the onions and the veggies, add the meat back in and spices, and away we go. So the idea with the spices is the pork we want to effectively make Italian sausage with. And so if you can get a pound of Italian sausage and a pound of beef, then you don't need to use as much spice as we're using here. But effectively, we're trying to make Italian sausage out of the pork side of things. So the key ingredient there is I've got a bunch of Italian spices, but it's fennel seeds. Fennel seeds is really the kicker. So fennel seeds, paprika, we got basil, oregano, thyme, and marjoram that we're going to add in, as well as salt and pepper. So I will pause that for a sec and come back and while we get the meat going. So pan heat, medium high. I shouldn't be able to hold my hand there too long, okay? So if you can get all that ready, then we'll get on to cooking the meat. So the meat here is quite loose packed versus the meat that we get in North America. So I just dump the whole thing in, and then I'm going to separate this into 6 pieces. I'm going to let that sear on the bottom, and then I'll turn it while it's browned, and then sear it on the other side. I might sear it on a couple different sides depending how it goes. So I'll try to squash this down. My pan may have been a little bit too hot for this, but we'll see how it goes. Come back to you in a second. So I flipped most of them here. I just had this last one. Of course, using one hand isn't ideal. So I flip them, then mash them down so there's a little bit more surface area there. So then the brown, we don't want too much liquid to kind of come out of them. So that's why we don't kind of crush it up in the pan too much here. So I'll keep that going, and then the plan is to take those out, and rather than kind of like mash these up by just doing this, I find it easier to cut. Okay, well, now we know that the phone calls mess up the video and you can't pause. But you can see that there's kind of some liquid coming out. That's just that getting cooked through. So we want to get these out of the pan. And pause. Okay, got these out of the pan now. I'm just going to leave those to sit. See all that brown goodness there? So what we're going to do now is we are going to add the onions in. God, I really need someone else filming this business here. So we add the onions in, and then the onions will somewhat deglaze this as well, but we need to add a bit of oil now. The meat had its own oil, but the onions need a little bit extra there. So we'll start cooking the onions, and then we'll chop this business up. Okay, onions are sweating in there, and all I basically do is chop these up to and from. Again, like I said, this is a lot looser packed than stuff is in North America. But if you buy ground beef like in bulk from the butcher's counter, it'll be a little more loose packed like this. So this chops pretty easy, but it saves me a bunch of chopping. And then my seasoning ratio is for each pound of beef, I use 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. So in this case, I had close to 2 pounds of meat, and so 2 or 3 teaspoons of kosher salt. So we'll let that sit. Onions are browning. We don't want those to burn. So when they get about this done, we will add the carrots in. And I'll add the garlic as well. Alright, I've got the carrots added. They've been cooking for a little bit. Basically want the onions to be soft. And again, I didn't mention, but probably turn the heat down in between doing the meat and then adding the onions. So you can see there's all the brown stuff stuck to the bottom. So once the carrots have been in there 3 to 4 minutes or so, so that's like 6-7 minutes for the onions, a few minutes for the carrots. We're going to throw about a half cup of red wine. We're going to measure that out. A little bit left for the chef. And then we're going to deglaze this pan. And so the acid of the wine, you want to use a spatula, and the acid of the wine helps to release that browned frond that gets created on the bottom of the pan. And so we want to get that flavor up. And I'm going to let that reduce down so there's almost no liquid left. And keep stirring, but I don't want it to burn and stick. And then I'll add the meat and season. Okay, I've got the meat added in. If there's any kind of big chunks, you can chop that up either with your spatula or your silicone. So we're going to mix this up. I'm going to add the seasoning here. So fennel seeds, that gives it that licoricey taste that Italian sausage has. Paprika. I'm just using sweet paprika, not spicy paprika here. And then our Italian herbs, marjoram, oregano, probably a little more oregano than the others. Thyme. And basil. And I forgot pepper, which I have pre-ground in a mortar and pestle. You can just use fresh ground pepper there. Alright, so that'll get stirred up, and I'll let that cook for a few minutes. Okay, this has been cooking for a few minutes now, and you can see it's starting to sizzle. I forgot to mention is I always use full fat. You can buy beef in 80-20, 90-10, and 95-5. I always use 80-20 beef. Fat gives it the flavor. So the one thing I forgot on the mise en place that I usually use is, and that I have some to use up, is some tomato paste. So we're going to use a bit of tomato paste here, probably a teaspoon or a tablespoon or two. That's probably a tablespoon there, but I'll add the other tablespoon when I got two hands to squeeze out the thing. Stir that up a little, and then I'm going to add, oh shoot, need my hand. I'm going to add some chicken stock. This is homemade chicken stock, but you can use store-bought stuff. And I'm going to add probably, let's say, 2 cups of that. Stir that through. And then you can just do tomato paste and the chicken stock if you want it to kind of be a meatier feel. But I like kind of the combo with the tomatoey side. So I'm going to add probably about a cup of tomato puree. And so you can either buy, oh, why is this camera? So you can either buy canned tomatoes and then use a blender to puree those up, or just buy the pureed tomatoes. So I'm going to get this all mixed up. My gimbal's not cooperating. I'm going to get this all mixed up, and then we're going to let that simmer for probably 30 minutes or so. Just checking in. This is how it should simmer. It's just kind of like not a rapid boil, but a light simmer like that. And we'll leave that going for 20-30 minutes. So just stirring probably once every 5 minutes or so, and just monitoring your levels. If the liquid gets too low, you can just add another splash of chicken stock, or you can just use water if you would like. Okay, mental note that the video does go into standby at some point and cannot be paused. So now look at you can see the consistency here. That's a pretty good consistency for what I want. And so, next ingredient that's going to go in, which is kind of the surprise ingredient as far as Bolognese sauce goes, is some dairy. So I'm going to put probably 1/4 to 1/2 cup of heavy cream in there. And you can use milk if you want, but don't use skim milk. Heavy cream's the best because you don't have to use as much and it gives the same effect. So now I just want to stir this through, and then I'm going to let this simmer again for probably 10 minutes or so. And then it's kind of like cooking it down to the preference that you want for whatever dish you're using. For this is going to go into a lasagna, and they will use uncooked noodles, so I'll probably leave a little bit extra liquid as a result. So we'll cook that, we'll get that simmering again, we'll cook that down for 10 minutes. Okay, this hasn't been going for quite 10 minutes or so, but I think we can pretty much wrap up the video. So once it gets down to that consistency, you want to let there's a tenderizing agent or enzyme in the dairy that allows the meat to be even more tender. So you definitely want to give that some time. I'm going to test it for seasoning. And actually, I would say right there, that's dead on. If you find that it needs, it could be salt, but it's a lot of times I find it needs more, how I would describe richness, but that's an umami flavor. So you can throw Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce never hurts. Or you can use fish sauce as well, Vietnamese fish sauce or Thai fish sauce. So that helps give it a little bit more of that that savory flavor. If you find it's a little bit too salty, you can add some kind of acid, like maybe like a balsamic vinegar or something like that. And then obviously you can add salt, or you can add lemon juice. But remember, you're probably serving this with Parmigiano Reggiano on top, and that'll give it a little bit of that kind of bite as well as that umami flavor. Let's try this again. Yeah, I think that is perfect right there. But if it needs the acid, you could use lemon juice as well. And if it's too salty, the lemon juice will counteract that salty flavor. So that is basically it. Then top this with Parmesan cheese on whatever type of pasta you want, or in this case, I'm going to be baking it into a lasagna for when you guys get home from Poland. So, all good. See if I can get in there for a buy shot. All right. Happy cooking.